Have you ever noticed how some people can simply say no without flinching, without explaining, without apologizing? They don't offer elaborate excuses. They don't spend hours crafting the perfect rejection message. They simply refuse, and somehow, the world doesn't collapse around them. Now think about yourself. When was the last time you said no to someone without immediately feeling the need to justify your decision? When was the last time you refused a request without that familiar knot of guilt forming in your stomach? If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone. We live in a world that has conditioned us to believe that our worth lies in our availability, in our willingness to say yes, in our capacity to accommodate others, even at the expense of our own well-being. Since childhood, you've been taught that good people don't refuse, that kind people don't reject, that worthy people don't prioritize themselves. But here's a truth that might feel uncomfortable. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you're not being kind. You're being dishonest, not just with others, but with yourself. And this dishonesty comes at a price that's far higher than the momentary discomfort of saying no. Think about it. How many times have you agreed to something you didn't want to do, only to spend days dreading it, resenting it, and ultimately showing up with half your energy, half your presence, half your authentic self? How many times have you said yes, then immediately started plotting how to get out of it later? How many times have you overextended yourself to the point of exhaustion, all because you couldn't bring yourself to utter that simple, powerful word, no? The most fascinating part? When you finally do say no, what follows is often not the catastrophe you imagined. Instead, something subtle but profound begins to shift. People start to see you differently. They begin to respect your boundaries, value your time, recognize your autonomy. Not everyone, of course, and we'll talk about that. But those who matter, those who deserve a place in your life, they respond to your authenticity with a new kind of respect. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He recognized that the process of individuation, of becoming your complete, authentic self, requires the courage to disappoint others. It demands the strength to stand in your truth, even when that truth is simply, no, I won't do that, no explanation needed, no justification required. But this isn't about becoming cold or callous. It's not about turning your back on genuine connection or responsibility. It's about reclaiming the power that you've been giving away with every reluctant yes, with every exhausting explanation, with every moment spent justifying choices that need no justification. In this video, we're going to explore the art of the authentic no, the refusal that comes from a place of self-respect rather than self-defense, from clarity rather than fear. You'll discover why your explanations are actually undermining your boundaries, how to recognize when you're being manipulated into justifying yourself, and most importantly, how to embrace the profound freedom that awaits on the other side of the unnecessary explanation. Because when you stop explaining your no's, something remarkable happens. You don't just change how others see you, you transform how you see yourself. And that transformation is the beginning of a new kind of power, a new kind of presence, a new kind of peace. So I ask you now, looking into your eyes, are you ready to stop explaining yourself to people who haven't earned the right to your justifications? Are you prepared to embrace the power of the unexplained no? Because once you do, everything will change. From the moment you were born, you've been trained to say yes. As a child, your compliance was rewarded with approval. Your agreeableness was met with affection. Your willingness to accommodate was interpreted as goodness. And slowly, invisibly, the association formed in your mind. Saying yes equals being worthy of love. This conditioning runs so deep that most of us don't even recognize it as conditioning. We think it's just who we are, naturally helpful, inherently accommodating, intrinsically selfless. But what if this isn't your nature at all? What if this automatic yes is actually a prison you've been living in for so long that you've mistaken its walls for your own skin? Think about the last time someone asked something of you. Before you even processed the request, before you consulted your own needs or desires, before you checked your capacity or boundaries, what was your instinctive response? For most people, the automatic pilot is set to yes. And this automatic yes isn't freedom. It's a prison. It's a prison built of expectations, others' expectations of your constant availability, and your expectation that meeting those demands will somehow fulfill you. It's a prison reinforced by fear, Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as selfish or unkind. It's a prison guarded by guilt, the guilt that arises whenever you even consider prioritizing your own needs. Carl Jung understood that this prison doesn't just restrict your actions, it confines your very identity. He wrote about the persona, this mask we wear to be accepted by society. For many of us, the agreeable, ever-available, never-refusing persona has become so fused with our sense of self that we can no longer distinguish between who we truly are and who we've been conditioned to be. The most insidious part? This prison gives the illusion of safety. After all, when you say yes to everyone, you avoid immediate conflict. You sidestep the momentary discomfort of disappointing someone. You escape the short-term anxiety of asserting a boundary. But this perceived safety comes at the cost of your authenticity, your energy, and ultimately, your freedom. And here's what makes this prison truly devastating. It's self-reinforcing. Each time you say yes when you want to say no, you strengthen the neural pathways that make automatic agreement your default response. Each time you override your own needs to meet someone else's expectations, you reinforce the belief that their desires should take precedence over your well-being. Each time you ignore your internal resistance in favor of external approval, you teach your mind that your own voice doesn't matter. But perhaps the most painful aspect of this prison is how it affects your relationships. When you consistently say yes without discernment, you attract and enable people who benefit from your lack of boundaries. You become a magnet for those who, consciously or unconsciously, seek someone they can control through expectation, guilt, or manipulation. And even in your healthy relationships with people who would respect your no if you offered it, your automatic yes creates a fundamental dishonesty. These people aren't relating to the real you. They're interacting with your agreeable persona, your pleasing mask, your accommodating facade. They're making requests based on what they think you want, not understanding that you've trained yourself to want whatever they want. This is why breaking free from the prison of the automatic yes isn't just about learning to say no. It's about reclaiming your authentic self. It's about rediscovering who you are beneath the layers of conditioning that have taught you that your worth depends on your willingness to accommodate others. Because here's the truth that your automatic yes has been hiding from you. You are already worthy. Your value doesn't increase when you say yes. Your worth doesn't diminish when you say no. Your inherent dignity as a human being remains constant, regardless of how available you make yourself to others. The first step toward freedom is recognizing the prison for what it is. Not a natural state, not an inherent personality trait, but a conditioned response that you can, with awareness and practice, begin to change. And that change begins not with learning new techniques for saying no, but with understanding why saying no feels so impossible in the first place. In the next part, we'll explore the hidden cost of something many of us don't even realize we're doing, explaining ourselves excessively when we do manage to say no. Because even when we break free enough to refuse, our explanations often undermine the very boundaries we're trying to set. Have you ever noticed what happens when you finally gather the courage to say no? That immediate, almost reflexive urge that follows? The compulsion to explain, to justify, to provide reasons that will make your refusal acceptable to the other person. It's as if saying no isn't enough. You feel obligated to build a case for why your no should be respected. I can't make it to your event because I have another commitment. I can't take on that project because my schedule is already full. I can't lend you money because I'm saving for something important. On the surface, these explanations seem harmless, even polite. After all, isn't it considerate to help the other person understand your reasoning? Isn't it kind to soften the blow of rejection with a thoughtful explanation? But there's a hidden cost to this pattern of excessive explanation, a cost that most of us never recognize until it's extracted years of our energy, undermined countless boundaries, and fundamentally altered how others perceive our autonomy. The first cost is the most obvious: your time and mental energy. Think about how much mental space you dedicate to crafting the perfect explanation, the rehearsing in your head, the anticipating of their potential objections, the careful selection of words that will make your no seem reasonable, justified, acceptable. All of this requires energy that could be directed toward what truly matters to you. But the deeper cost is far more insidious. When you explain your no, you unconsciously communicate that your decision is up for debate. You signal that your boundary is negotiable if the other person can just counter your reasoning. You transform what should be a simple statement of your will into an invitation for persuasion. Carl Jung recognized that this pattern reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of personal authority. When you feel compelled to justify your choices, you're unconsciously seeking external validation for decisions that require no validation beyond your own discernment. You're treating your own authority as insufficient, as if your no only becomes legitimate when others accept your reasoning. And here's where the real damage occurs. People learn how you operate. They observe that your no's come with explanations, and those explanations reveal the conditions under which you might be persuaded to change your mind. They learn that if they can just challenge your reasoning, find holes in your explanation, or present a counter-argument that makes you feel guilty, they can potentially override your decision. Over time, this trains the people around you to see your boundaries not as firm declarations of your needs, but as opening positions in a negotiation.
Your no becomes the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. And for those with manipulative tendencies, your explanations become a roadmap for how to get you to relent. Consider what happens when you say, "I can't help you move this weekend because I have plans." The person might respond, "What plans? Can't you reschedule? This is really important to me." Now you're in the position of having to defend the legitimacy of your plans, to prove that they're important enough to justify your refusal. But what if your plans are simply to rest after an exhausting week? What if your plan is to protect your energy, to honor your need for solitude, to prioritize your mental health? In our achievement-oriented culture, these needs are often not seen as legitimate reasons. And so you find yourself either lying about your plans or reluctantly giving in. The explanation trap creates another problem. It makes your boundaries conditional rather than inherent. When you say, "I can't help you because I'm busy," you imply that if you weren't busy, you would be obligated to help. You tie your right to refuse to external circumstances rather than to your inherent right to choose how you spend your time and energy.
This is why the authentic no, the no without explanation, is so powerful. It states simply, "No, I won't be able to do that. Period. No justification, no defense, no invitation for debate. Just the clear, unapologetic expression of your will." At first, this kind of no feels almost violent in its directness. We've been so conditioned to soften our refusals that stating them plainly feels harsh, even cruel. But there's a profound respect in the unexplained no respect for yourself in honoring your own authority, and respect for the other person in trusting them to handle your refusal without needing it cushioned or justified. In the next part, we'll explore the psychological foundations of authentic refusal through the lens of Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming your complete, differentiated self. Because learning to say no without explanation isn't just about setting boundaries. It's about reclaiming your fundamental right to self-determination. To truly understand the power of the unexplained no, we need to dive deeper into the psychological foundations that make it so transformative. And there's no better guide for this exploration than Carl Jung, whose insights into the human psyche offer profound wisdom about the journey toward authentic self-expression. Jung introduced the concept of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your complete, differentiated self. Not the self that was conditioned by society, not the self that was shaped by others' expectations, but your true self, the unique, whole individual you were meant to be. What most people don't realize is that individuation isn't just some lofty philosophical ideal. It's a practical, psychological necessity for mental health and genuine fulfillment. And one of its most essential components is the ability to establish clear boundaries between yourself and others, boundaries that don't require justification or explanation. Jung understood something profound about human nature. We all wear masks. He called these masks personas, the social faces we present to the world. The persona isn't inherently negative. It's a necessary interface between our inner world and the external environment. The problem arises when we become so identified with our persona that we lose touch with our authentic self. For many of us, the people-pleasing persona, the mask that says, "I'm always available, always accommodating, always willing," has become so fused with our identity that we can no longer distinguish between who we truly are and who we've been conditioned to be. We mistake the mask for our face. This is where the unexplained no becomes not just a boundary-setting technique, but a profound act of psychological liberation. When you say no without explanation, you're doing something revolutionary. You're separating your decisions from your persona. You're declaring that your choices don't need to align with the pleasing mask you've worn. You're asserting that your authentic self exists beyond the expectations that others have of you. Jung also spoke extensively about the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we've repressed, denied, or hidden because they don't fit with our conscious self-image. For many people pleasers, the capacity for healthy selfishness, for prioritizing their own needs, for disappointing others, these all become shadow qualities. We push them into the unconscious because they contradict our persona as the eternally accommodating helper. But Jung was clear: what we repress doesn't disappear. It grows stronger in the shadow, eventually manifesting in unhealthy ways. Passive aggression, resentment, emotional exhaustion, or even physical illness. The shadow demands integration, not repression. This is why learning to say no without explanation isn't selfish in the negative sense. It's actually an act of shadow integration, of reclaiming those parts of yourself that know how to prioritize your own well-being, that understand the necessity of self-protection, that recognize your inherent right to choose how your energy is spent. Jung also introduced the concept of the authentic voice, that quiet but unwavering inner knowing that speaks your truth. For many of us, this voice has been systematically silenced by years of people-pleasing conditioning. We've learned to override it, ignore it, doubt it, but it never fully disappears. When you feel that knot in your stomach as you reluctantly say yes to something you don't want to do, that's your authentic voice trying to be heard. When you feel resentment building as you overextend yourself, that's your authentic voice protesting its dismissal. When you feel relief wash over you after canceling plans you never wanted to make, that's your authentic voice celebrating its momentary liberation. The practice of the unexplained no is, at its core, a practice of reconnecting with this authentic voice. It's about creating space for this voice to speak without immediately being drowned out by the conditioned voice of explanation and justification. Jung believed that this reconnection with our authentic voice is not just personally healing, it's collectively transformative. When you begin to live from your authentic center, you give others permission to do the same. Your unexplained no becomes an invitation for others to examine their own patterns of people-pleasing, their own habits of living from the persona rather than the authentic self. This is perhaps the most beautiful paradox of Jungian psychology. True individuation doesn't lead to isolation or disconnection. Instead, it creates the possibility for more authentic connection. When you relate to others from your true self rather than your pleasing persona, you create space for genuine relationship rather than mutual manipulation. The unexplained no, then, isn't just a boundary-setting technique. It's a profound practice of psychological integrity. It's a declaration that you are reclaiming your authentic voice, integrating your shadow, and committing to the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are. In the next part, we'll explore how this Jungian understanding transforms the act of saying no from a moment of rejection into a powerful act of individuation, a crucial step in becoming your complete, differentiated, authentic self. Most of us have been taught to see the word no as negative, a rejection, a denial, a closing of doors. We've been conditioned to believe that saying no is something we should avoid whenever possible, something we should feel guilty about, something we should immediately justify or explain. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if saying no, particularly the unexplained no, isn't a negative act at all, but one of the most positive, affirming choices we can make in our journey toward wholeness? This is where Jung's concept of individuation transforms our understanding of refusal. In the Jungian framework, individuation is the process of psychological differentiation, of becoming a separate, whole individual. And central to this process is the ability to distinguish between what is truly yours and what belongs to others. Your desires versus their expectations, your boundaries versus their demands, your authentic choices versus their projected needs. The unexplained no is a powerful act of this differentiation. When you say no without justification, you are making a profound declaration. This boundary exists not because of external circumstances that you might be able to argue with or change. This boundary exists because I have decided it exists. My will, my discernment, my choice is sufficient reason. This is revolutionary for many people-pleasers who have spent their lives believing that their preferences only become valid when endorsed by others, that their choices only become legitimate when understood and approved by those around them. The unexplained no states unequivocally, your internal authority needs no external validation. Jung believed that this reclamation of internal authority is essential not just for psychological health, but for spiritual development. He saw individuation as a sacred process, the journey of becoming who you were meant to be, of fulfilling your unique potential in the world. And this journey necessarily involves disappointing others, challenging expectations, and refusing to contort yourself to fit external demands. The unexplained no, then, isn't just a boundary-setting technique. It's a spiritual practice. It's an act of faith in your own inner wisdom, a declaration that your authentic voice deserves to be expressed, even when it contradicts what others want from you. This perspective completely reframes the experience of saying no. Instead of seeing it as a moment of rejection, you can recognize it as a moment of profound self-affirmation. Instead of focusing on what you're denying someone else, you can focus on what you're honoring within yourself. When you say no without explanation, you're not just refusing a request. You're actively choosing integrity over approval. You're choosing authenticity over accommodation. You're choosing self-respect over external validation. These are not selfish choices. They are necessary acts of psychological and spiritual maturation. Jung understood something that our people-pleasing culture has forgotten. True generosity can only come from a self that is whole and differentiated. When you give from a place of obligation, resentment, or fear, your giving is contaminated. It becomes a transaction rather than a gift, a performance rather than an offering. But when you have reclaimed your right to say no, when you know in your bones that you could refuse if you wanted to, then your yes becomes truly meaningful. It becomes a genuine choice rather than a conditioned response. It becomes an authentic gift rather than a fearful appeasement. This is the paradox that Jung illuminated. Only those who have mastered the art of refusal can truly master the art of giving. Only those who can disappoint others when necessary can truly delight them when appropriate. Only those who can stand firmly in their no can offer a yes that comes from the heart rather than from fear. The unexplained no also serves another crucial function in the individuation process. It helps you identify where you end and others begin. Many of us with weak boundaries have a blurred sense of this distinction. We feel responsible for others' emotions, burdened by their expectations, defined by their perceptions. We struggle to distinguish between their projections and our reality. When you say no without explanation, you create a clear psychological boundary. You state implicitly, your reaction to my refusal is yours to manage, not mine to fix. Your disappointment is yours to process, not mine to prevent. Your opinion of my choice is yours to hold, not mine to change. This boundary is essential for healthy differentiation. It allows you to exist as a separate, whole individual rather than as an extension of others' needs and expectations. It creates the psychological space necessary for your authentic self to emerge and flourish. Jung would see the practice of the unexplained no as a crucial step in what he called the development of the personality, the lifelong process of becoming more fully yourself. Each time you honor your authentic voice by refusing without justification, you strengthen your connection to your true self. Each time you resist the urge to explain or apologize for your boundaries, you affirm your inherent right to exist as you are, not as others wish you to be. In the next part, we'll move from theory to practice, exploring specific techniques for mastering the art of the authentic, know how to refuse without guilt, how to withstand the discomfort of others' reactions, and how to recognize when an explanation is truly needed versus when it's merely a habitual attempt to manage others' perceptions of you. Now that we understand the psychological foundations and transformative power of the unexplained no, let's explore practical techniques for implementing this practice in your daily life. Because theory without application remains just that, theory, and the true power of the authentic no can only be experienced through consistent practice. The first and perhaps most challenging technique is what I call the clean no. This is the practice of refusing without adding qualifiers, explanations, or softeners. It sounds simple, but for chronic people pleasers, it can feel almost impossible. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry, but I can't make it to your event because I have another commitment," you simply say, "No, I won't be able to attend." Notice the discomfort that arises even as you imagine saying those words. That discomfort is your conditioning speaking, the voice of your people-pleasing persona protesting its dismissal. Acknowledge this discomfort without being controlled by it. Remember that this discomfort is temporary, while the freedom gained from practicing the clean no is lasting. The second technique is the pause practice. Most people-pleasers respond automatically and immediately to requests, often saying yes before they've even fully processed what's being asked of them. The pause practice interrupts this automatic response pattern. When someone makes a request, simply say, "Let me think about that and get back to you." This creates space between the request and your response space in which your authentic voice can emerge. During this pause, check in with your body. Physical sensations often reveal what your conditioned mind tries to hide. Does the thought of saying yes create a knot in your stomach? Does it make your shoulders tense? Does it trigger a feeling of heaviness or dread? These physical responses are your authentic self, communicating through your body when your mind has been conditioned to ignore it. The third technique is what Jung might have called shadow integration practice. This involves consciously embracing the aspects of refusal that you've been conditioned to fear. If you fear being seen as selfish, practice saying to yourself, "Yes, in this moment, I am choosing myself over others." And that is not only acceptable, it is necessary. If you fear disappointing others, practice saying, "I am willing to disappoint someone else rather than disappoint myself." This practice doesn't just change your external behavior. It transforms your internal relationship with the parts of yourself that know how to set boundaries. Instead of rejecting these parts as selfish or mean, you begin to recognize them as essential aspects of your wholeness. The fourth technique addresses one of the most common obstacles to the unexplained no, the fear of conflict. I call this the broken record technique. When you refuse without explanation, some people will inevitably push for justification. They'll ask why, demand reasons, try to problem solve your refusal away. The broken record technique involves calmly repeating your refusal without being drawn into explanation. "No, I won't be able to do that." "But why not? Is something wrong?" "It just doesn't work for me." "Is it because of what happened last time?" "Because I can assure you, I understand, but my answer is still no." This technique requires tremendous presence and self-containment. You'll feel the pull to explain, to justify, to make the other person understand. Resist this pull. Remember that your no doesn't require understanding or approval to be valid. The fifth technique is perhaps the most powerful, the compassionate witness. This involves observing your own discomfort during and after refusing without trying to fix or escape it. When guilt arises, don't fight it or surrender to it. Simply witness it with compassion. "I notice I'm feeling guilty right now. That's my conditioning speaking. This feeling will pass." This practice of compassionate witnessing creates a crucial separation between you and your conditioned responses. You begin to recognize that the guilt, anxiety, or fear that arises when you set boundaries isn't actually you. It's just programming running through your system. And with consistent practice, these programmed responses begin to weaken. The sixth technique addresses the common fear that refusing without explanation is somehow rude or unkind. I call this the tone transformation. The unexplained no doesn't have to be delivered coldly or harshly. In fact, it's most powerful when offered with calm confidence and genuine goodwill. Practice saying no with warmth in your voice, with a gentle smile, with authentic care for the person you're refusing. "Thank you for thinking of me, but no, I won't be taking that on. I appreciate the invitation, but I won't be able to attend. That's not going to work for me, but I wish you well with it." The warmth in your delivery makes it clear that you're not rejecting the person. You're simply refusing a specific request. This distinction is crucial both for maintaining relationships and for managing your own tendency to conflate refusing with rejecting. The seventh technique is what I call the selective explanation. While the unexplained no is a powerful practice, There are legitimate contexts where some explanation is appropriate, particularly in close relationships built on mutual trust and respect. The key is to discern when an explanation serves your authentic expression versus when it's merely an attempt to manage others' perceptions or emotions. Ask yourself, am I explaining because this person has earned the right to understand my process, or am I explaining because I'm afraid of their reaction if I don't? If it's the former, a brief, honest explanation may be appropriate. If it's the latter, the explanation will likely undermine your boundary rather than strengthen it. The eighth technique addresses the aftermath of saying no, what I call the discomfort surfing practice. After refusing, especially in significant relationships, you may experience waves of doubt, guilt, or anxiety. Instead of trying to escape these feelings by retracting your no or over-explaining after the fact, practice riding these waves of discomfort like a surfer. Notice the sensation, stay present with it, breathe through it, and watch as it eventually crests and subsides. Each time you successfully surf a wave of post-refusal discomfort, you strengthen your capacity to withstand the temporary unpleasantness of disappointing others. The ninth technique is the reality check practice. Our people-pleasing minds often catastrophize the consequences of saying no. We imagine relationships ending, opportunities vanishing, reputations crumbling, all because we refused one request. The reality check practice involves consciously examining the actual consequences of your refusal versus the catastrophic scenarios your mind has created. Keep a journal of your experiences with saying no. Record what you feared would happen, then record what actually happened. Over time, you'll accumulate evidence that the catastrophic consequences you fear rarely materialize, while the benefits of authentic refusal, increased energy, greater self-respect, more genuine relationships, consistently appear. The final and perhaps most transformative technique is what Jung might have called individuation reinforcement. This involves consciously connecting each act of authentic refusal to your larger journey of becoming your whole, differentiated self. After saying no without explanation, take a moment to silently acknowledge, with this refusal, I am honoring my authentic voice. I am reclaiming my authority. I am becoming more fully myself. This practice transforms each no from an isolated boundary-setting moment into a meaningful step in your lifelong journey of individuation. It infuses your refusals with purpose and connects them to your deepest values and aspirations. Remember that mastering the authentic no is not an overnight transformation. It's a practice, one that requires patience, persistence, and profound self-compassion. You will stumble. You will sometimes fall back into explanation and justification. You will occasionally say yes when you want to say no. This is not failure. It's simply part of the learning process. The path to authentic self-expression isn't linear. It's a spiral, circling back through familiar territory at deeper levels of understanding and integration. Each time you practice these techniques, even imperfectly, you're unwinding years of conditioning and creating new neural pathways of authentic self-expression. In the next and final part, we'll explore the profound freedom that awaits beyond the need for explanation, how your relationships transform, how your energy expands, and how your entire experience of yourself fundamentally shifts when you master the art of the authentic no. When you first begin practicing the authentic no refusing without explanation, justification, or apology, something uncomfortable happens. The people around you get confused. Some get angry. Others try to push back, to extract the explanations they've come to expect. And inside you, guilt and anxiety surge like waves threatening to pull you under. But if you can weather this initial storm, if you can stand firm in your unexplained no despite the discomfort, something remarkable begins to unfold. A new kind of freedom emerges, not all at once, but gradually, like the slow breaking of dawn after a long night. This is the freedom beyond explanation, a state of being where your choices no longer require external validation, where your boundaries no longer need justification, where your authentic voice no longer seeks permission to be heard. In this freedom, you discover that the world doesn't collapse when you disappoint others. Relationships that are meant to endure will adapt to your newfound authenticity. Those that were built on your excessive availability may fall away, creating space for connections that honor your wholeness rather than exploit your conditioning. You discover that your energy, once drained by constant explanation and justification, now remains within you, creating a reservoir of vitality that can be directed toward what truly matters to you. The mental space once occupied by rehearsing explanations and managing others' perceptions becomes available for creativity, presence, and genuine connection. Perhaps most profoundly, you discover a new relationship with yourself. The parts of you that know how to set boundaries, that understand the necessity of self-protection, that recognize your inherent right to choose, these parts are no longer relegated to the shadow. They become integrated aspects of your conscious identity, working in harmony with your capacity for compassion and connection. This integration is what Jung called the union of opposites, the reconciliation of seemingly contradictory aspects of the self into a more complete, differentiated whole, the capacity to care deeply for others and to prioritize your own well-being, the ability to be genuinely generous and firmly boundaried, the wisdom to know when to give and when to withhold. As you continue practicing the authentic no, you'll notice subtle but significant shifts in how others perceive and treat you. Those who once saw you as endlessly available begin to recognize your sovereignty. Those who once felt entitled to your energy now approach with respect rather than expectation. Those who once dismissed your boundaries now encounter them with new awareness. Not everyone will celebrate this transformation, of course. Some people benefited from your excessive availability, your constant explanations, your reluctance to disappoint. These people may resist your change, may try to pull you back into old patterns, may even exit your life when their attempts fail. But here's the truth that your people-pleasing conditioning never allowed you to see. Their resistance is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's confirmation that you're doing something right, that you're reclaiming parts of yourself that were never meant to be given away. The freedom beyond explanation isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about becoming more authentically connected to yourself first and then to others from that place of wholeness. It's about offering your presence, your energy, your care as genuine gifts rather than fearful appeasements. It's about creating relationships built on mutual respect rather than codependent patterns. As you master the art of the authentic no, you'll find that your yes becomes more powerful as well. When you say yes from a place of genuine choice rather than conditioned response, your agreement carries a different energy. It's clean, uncontaminated by resentment or obligation. It's wholehearted rather than half-hearted. It's a true gift rather than a reluctant concession. This is perhaps the most beautiful paradox of the authentic no. It ultimately enhances your capacity for meaningful connection. By clearly establishing where you end and others begin, you create the conditions for genuine intimacy rather than enmeshed codependence. By honoring your own boundaries, you develop deeper respect for the boundaries of others. By reclaiming your right to choose, you grant others the dignity of their own choices. The journey toward this freedom isn't linear or simple. There will be moments of doubt, days of regression, periods of confusion. The conditioning that taught you to explain, justify, and accommodate runs deep. Unlearning these patterns takes time, practice, and profound self-compassion. But with each unexplained no, with each boundary held firm despite discomfort, with each moment of choosing yourself, despite the pull to please others, you take another step toward wholeness. You move closer to the person you were meant to be before the world taught you that your worth depends on your availability. So I ask you now, looking into your eyes, are you ready to embrace the freedom beyond explanation? Are you willing to endure the temporary discomfort of disappointing others to discover the lasting peace of honoring yourself? Are you prepared to say no, clearly, firmly, without justification, and to stand in that no even when the world pushes back? Because when you do, when you finally master the authentic no, you don't just change how others see you, you transform how you see yourself. And in that transformation lies a freedom that no external validation could ever provide, the freedom to be fully, unapologetically, authentically you. If this message resonated with you, if you recognized yourself in the patterns we've explored, write in the comments, I choose my authentic no. Let's see how many here are ready to step into the freedom beyond explanation. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights on psychological freedom, authentic living, and the journey toward becoming your whole differentiated self. The path of individuation is challenging, but you don't have to walk it alone. Thank you for your presence, your attention, and your willingness to consider a new way of being in the world. Until next time, may your nose be authentic and your freedom boundless.